Hi, I'm Darren, a Christian minister based in Aberdeen in Scotland. And at the moment, we are looking in our church at the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis. And we started off at the beginning, obviously, at the way in which Joseph's brothers acted in a mood of absolute jealousy towards Joseph, and the fact that Jacob, his father, loved him so much, about that coat that he famously was given, and the dreams that he had, and the fact that they plotted to kill him and ended up selling him into slavery. And the message was very much, jealousy is a bad thing. Looking at someone, wanting what they have and allowing that to twist our view of them is a bad thing. But I do want to say that there is a little bit of nuance in that. Because sometimes there are occasions when we can look at what some people have and go, do you know what, you shouldn't have that. That should be given out to many, many more people. And that is when we look at our world and the amount of people that are in it who have accumulated so much wealth, so many resources, that they could not spend it or get rid of it or use it in 100,000 lifetimes. And yet many of these people still end up getting tax breaks from governments around the world and hold the keys to the doors of power purely because of that wealth that they have hoarded, very often off the backs of poorer workers who have lost out in order to make those people richer. And when we see people with that kind of money, with literally hundreds of billions of pounds or dollars or whatever your currency is, and then we see people, even in the so-called developed world, who are struggling to put meals on the tables, who are struggling to keep a roof above their head, to pay their bills, to pay for basic medical needs, to send their children to school. Very often these people are working full time and are still struggling. And yet we see this obscene amount of wealth at the very, very top. And we should be looking at that and going, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. Something has broken in our societies and in our world when there are people who can accumulate and hoard that amount of wealth and be lauded for it as some sort of geniuses. Whereas the people at the bottom very often are seen as undeserving, as lazy, as responsible for being where they are. And then I look at the book of Amos, the Old Testament prophet, who speaks so often about justice for the oppressed, for the poor, for the needy, about people hoarding wealth, building mansions and vineyards all over the place, but not helping the people at the bottom who are most in need. And Amos, very famously, in chapter 5 of his book, took aim at people who spoke praises to God with their lips, but did not with their actions stand up for the poor and the oppressed and the needy. He wrote this. He wrote, "Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice, an endless river of righteous living." We speak of God as a God of justice. And in the church today, there seems to be a pushback about the idea of social justice. Well, I'm sorry, but if God is not a God of social justice, then I'm not 100% sure what Amos was writing about, or Isaiah, or Jeremiah, or indeed what Jesus was speaking about when he said that whenever we had the chance to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to look after the sick, to welcome the visitor, then we would be doing that to him. That is social justice in action. So yes, we can actually get jealous of those people who have hoarded enormous amounts of wealth, but we can get jealous in a righteous way, just as God is a jealous God, as we read so often throughout the books of the Hebrew Bible. So we can be righteously jealous of those who have hoarded their wealth, usually off the backs of the poorest people in society, and say, this is wrong. That wealth belongs to all the people. When one person can be worth 400 billion US dollars, and yet billions of people in the world cannot even eat, something has broken in our world, and it is a calling of Jesus Christ to his followers to do something about that. It's a calling from the Old Testament prophets to all those who follow the God of Israel to do something about that, to stand up against our politicians, those in our media, those in the business world, who would say that this is a perfectly acceptable thing to have, who would say that those who have hoarded the wealth are deserving of power and responsibility, whereas those who are poorest are deserving of our disdain. We need to stand up for political policies, for media narratives that flip what we see at the moment, and actually stand up for the poorest and most needy. We need to be willing to give whenever we can, however we can, dependent on our own circumstances, to help those who are poor and in need. But we need to fight so that all who are poor and in need, especially in our richest countries, are not struggling just to be able to heat and eat and clothe and house their families. Something has broken in this world, and it is the calling of the followers of Christ to do something about it.